Previously on Hat to Hem, I found out I had less than 10 days to finish this commission. On top of that, I only had 2 days off during that time, and pregnancy fatigue was knocking me off my feet. Luckily, the only big thing left was the 1890s hat. I used the La Belle Epoque hat pattern from Lynn McMaster's. I've been using her patterns for years. They're very detailed with plenty of pictures and graphics as well as different variations for each style. I traced the pattern out before cutting it out a Foss shape, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. At the time, buckram was difficult to find, so I used Foss shape as an alternative. It starts out soft but stiffens under heat. I experimented with the steam from my iron and from my steamer. Both proved to take a long time. Pressing the flat pieces under a pressing cloth ended up being the most effective. The crown of the hat didn't want to curve nicely, so I recut the piece on the bias, which worked perfectly. Since I wasn't sure cutting it on the bias would work, I just cut out the basic shape, so now I'm trimming the piece down to get the correct shape. I also trimmed the other pieces since the Foss shape made the pieces a little wonky. Once the shapes were all corrected, I prepped the millinery wire by straightening it. It will be curving around the brim, but I want the Foss shape to control the curve, not the wire itself. The wire was then attached to the brim by machine with a zigzag stitch, and the same was done with the top part of the hat. I like to attach a piece of flannel to both sides of the brim to soften any hard edges or imperfections. For the first layer, I put the flannel beneath the brim piece and stitched along the pencil line that I made for the hat opening. Then I flipped it over and repeated the process with a second piece of flannel beneath the brim piece, this time following the stitch line I made when I attached the first flannel layer. I then repeated the process with the top layer of fabric. I folded the edges of the fabric over the edge and clipped it to keep it tight, and then I sewed some braided trim on for decoration before sewing the bottom layer of the hat off camera. Okay, I'm borderline exhausted, but I have to keep working on this because of the new deadline. So, the good news is the brim has a lot done on it. I got the trim, I have both layers of fabric, plus the flannel lining thing. So I think right now my plan is I'm going to work on sewing the flappy bit of fabric down, and then I will do that while watching a movie with my husband because I am tired. So you can see how I have the fabric folded over. Usually I would tack this down and then stitch this on, but time is so limited that I feel like I don't want to take the time to do that. I may regret this, who knows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fabric, I am going to fold it under, and I am going to just slip stitch it right along that edge. And hopefully that will finish off the brim, which will be a big relief at this point because I'm tired. Alright. At this point, I will probably check in tomorrow about where my progress is, or I'll just keep sewing. At this point, I'll probably just keep sewing. The deadline's so tight that I'm not sure if I really have time to really talk to the camera, so I might just put voice over it later. Maybe. We'll see. Alright, till then, see you soon. After attaching the top of the hat to the crown and wrapping it in a layer of flannel, I basted the top layer of fabric around the crown. Then I clipped it to help it lay flat. The fabric for the crown was wrapped around the base with the top edge tucked under. The fabric was pinned in place, and then the top edge was slip stitched down. The bottom edge of the fabric was wrapped under the bottom edge of the crown, and the fabric was secured with a prick stitch. Since this is not a pillbox hat, I still needed to attach it to the brim. After poking the center of the hat with my awl to make a hole for my scissors, I cut away the various layers until I had a hole in the center with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which was clipped into tabs and pressed upward. I attached the tabs to the inside of the crown using a prick stitch. I decided I wasn't a fan of how this seam looked, so I decided to add lace to the underbrim of the hat. This choice to add something that few people would see did take up some of my limited time to get this done. it was still worth it. I wasn't willing to turn in something to a client that I wasn't happy with myself. Next came the trim. I encased a bit of stiffer inner lining fabric inside leftover skirt fabric. It was turned right side out and given a press. I'll add this to the hat later. First, I need to get the placement of the rest of the trim right. Next, all the pieces of trim that were pinned on needed to be attached to the hat. I also bent the back of the hat up to shake things up a bit and show off the lace. Finally, I made this little hat pin to match the hat. Even though I wish I had a little more time with it, I do like how this hat turned out. I think it has a beautiful color palette, and I think the lace under the brim was the perfect touch. So, the hat is done, which means this commission is done, which means this video series is finally done. Wow! Thank you so much for following along on this roller coaster of a commission. I'm looking forward to getting some fresher content out to you soon that has nothing to do with the 1910s or 1890s. Speaking of which, let me know in the comments if you like the 1890s or the 1910s dress better. Thank you to Historic Philadelphia for this opportunity and to my patrons for their patience, and I will see you all next time. Bye!